Good evening, everyone. I'm Susan Abrams, CEO of Illinois Holocaust Museum, and on behalf of Fritzi Fritschall, President, Sam Harris, President Emeritus, Jordan Lamb, Chair, and our entire Board of Directors and museum family, I'm honored to welcome you to this special virtual opening of Mandela Struggle for Freedom. This exhibition about Nelson Mandela was created by the Canadian Museum for Human Rights in partnership with the Apartheid Museum in Johannesburg, South Africa. It takes visitors from the indignity of apartheid through the struggle that saw its defeat. It's a story of oppression and inhumanity, but ultimately one of strength and solidarity in the face of adversity. The opportunity to celebrate Mandela, a remarkable upstander, and his ideals of democracy and equity that moved millions to unite in the pursuit of a better future, inspired our museum to bring this remarkable exhibition to the Chicagoland area. We use our special exhibitions, as some of you on the program tonight know, both to delve deeper into aspects of the Holocaust and also to go broader into other areas of human rights and social justice, making connections to our world today and highlighting opportunities for all of us to make our world a better place. In 2016, I had the privilege to visit South Africa with Kerry Kennedy and the RFK Human Rights Organization she leads. We retraced her father, Bobby Kennedy's steps in his historic 1966 trip, visiting many of the locations that played critical roles in the road to overcoming apartheid. Bobby Kennedy, it was at the University of Cape Town that Bobby Kennedy gave his now famous Ripple of Hope speech, which reminds us that, and I quote, "Each time a man stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, he, and I add she, sends forth a tiny ripple of hope, and those ripples can build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance." This exhibition is an opportunity for all of us to remember not only Mandela's life, but his legacy. His work, as we all know, remains unfinished. In an era where freedoms are still fragile, our democratic values challenged, and far too many stripped of their rights because of who they are or what they believe, we have the opportunity and the responsibility to work together toward justice and equity for all, creating many more ripples of hope. I now want to take a moment to thank the incredible team that has made today possible. It truly takes a village. A huge thanks to our development, marketing, operations, and education teams, along with our world-class exhibitions team, led by Chief Curator Ariel Weininger and including John Tweedy, Emily Money, and Andrew Olakchuk. Today's exhibition and related programming also would not be possible without the generosity of our presenting sponsors, Wells Fargo, Allstate, and Elizabeth Moore's Genius Charitable Trust, and our supporting sponsors, Jenner & Block, Lester and Edward Annixter Family Foundation, Brenda and Lance Weiss, and our museum's Women's Leadership Committee, as well as our contributors who were noted on the pre-program screen this evening. I'd also like to thank our media sponsors, additional funders, community partners, and international tour supporters who also were listed on our pre-roll slides. It's really heartening and inspiring how many of you came together so generously to support the exhibition and programming. Thank you. And now, I'm thrilled to welcome our stellar panel, Isabelle Masson and John Davis, and our very own Kelley Szany as moderator. Isabelle is curator at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights and served as the museum's lead curator for the Mandela Struggle for Freedom exhibition. Isabelle specializes in international contemporary human rights issues as well as women's rights. Her field research has taken her to Southern and Eastern Africa on numerous occasions over the years. Isabelle lived in South Africa and witnessed its first democratic elections in 1994. John Davis has been described by his peers as a reporter's reporter, a truly exemplary newsman. John worked for WBBM TV for 21 years, where he co-anchored weekend newscasts while serving as a weekday general assignment reporter. John was the first US reporter to interview Nelson Mandela just hours after his release from prison. And he also produced the award-winning documentary Winds of Change that covered his time in the country. I'm also proud to say that John serves on our museum's board of directors. The panel, as I mentioned, will be moderated by Kelley, Szany, Vice President of Education and Exhibitions. And now it's my honor to welcome Bill Daley, Vice Chairman of Public Affairs for Wells Fargo. Bill is a member of the company's operating committee, leading the public affairs organization, which includes corporate communications, government relations, and public policy, marketing, and social impact and sustainability. Bill met Mandela a few times, both in South Africa and in Washington, D.C. And Bill, as I learned a few minutes ago, also has been one of John Davis's favorite news makers to cover. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you very much, Susan. I appreciate the opportunity, and I am truly honored to be here at the opening of this most impressive exhibit, which is showcasing the life and the work of the human rights icon, Nelson Mandela. I had the opportunity a few times to meet President Mandela. And the one time I remember, and I really tell this story because I want to read a quote that he gave. I asked him to autograph a program after the Congress had given him the highest honor Congress can give a human being, and that is the Congressional Medal of Freedom. And he took the program and he said, "I'll get it back to you." And about a month later, I got a framed program back signed by Nelson Mandela with a very nice comment. But under it was a quote, which he or his staff had put on into this frame. And it is, here's the quote, and it sums up so much of what he was. "During my lifetime, I have dedicated myself to this struggle of the African people. I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against Black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve, but if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." This sums up the courage of this man who for so long stood out against injustice and was the focal point of the rest of the world to suddenly realize how much of that world was wrong and to step up and to help the South Africans get rid of apartheid. I had the honor of meeting with him when President Clinton did a trip to, when I was Commerce Secretary, to Africa, to South Africa, pardon me. And they went to Robben Island. And the tour guide for Robben Island, for the two of them, was the guard who guarded, the prison guard who guarded Nelson Mandela for much of his time on Robben Island. It was incredible to think that, and they were such friends. And to think that this man could move beyond the pain and the suffering and the injustice which he experienced and embrace a different life was truly remarkable. I've had the pleasure and honor of meeting lots of people that are important or think they're important. But he was in a category, I think, of no one else I've met, at least in my lifetime, that was so special as a human being. Not only what he accomplished as a political leader and a human rights advocate, but just as a person. It was remarkable to be in his presence. His fight for racial justice quite literally changed our world. His commitment to doing what's right and creating positive change, even at great cost to himself, has inspired generations, not only in South Africa or Africa, but truly around the world. Wells Fargo is a proud sponsor of this exhibit, and we are proud to support the museum in bringing it to Chicagoland so people understand the importance of standing up for what is right. The museum is a term for people like Nelson Mandela, people who inspire change by supporting an important cause or belief and taking action to improve the world. That word is upstander. A person who won't sit idly by, but who is moved to take action to fight injustice and prejudice and therefore achieve positive change. We can all learn from President Mandela. Each and every one of us can be a spark for change. We can all be upstanders who work for fairness, justice, and human rights for all through our actions, whether they be big or small. On behalf of Wells Fargo, a company which stands united with the fight for justice and equality, thank you for the opportunity to support Mandela, the struggle for freedom, and the story that it truly brings to life. Thank you very much. And now we'll go to Kelley Szany, the VP of Education and Exhibition of the museum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Good evening, everyone. Isabelle and John, before we dive into what I am really looking forward to our conversation this evening, tonight we have the opportunity to share with you 3 powerful vocal performances by Quava Vocal Group, winner of the World Choir Games and one of the best choirs in Johannesburg, South Africa. It is now my honor to introduce to you Isabelle Masson, leader of Quava Vocal Group.
Hello, my name is Isabelle Masson and I am the conductor of Quava Vocal Group, a choir that is based in Johannesburg, South Africa. We were very excited when we received a request from the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center to put together a performance that will form part of their virtual exhibition of Nelson Mandela, A Struggle for Freedom. However, due to ongoing COVID restrictions in our country, we were unable to get together as a full choir, but we have put together with a few of our members some songs that tell a history of our country from the apartheid era all the way to when Nelson Mandela became the first democratically elected president of South Africa. I hope you really enjoy this performance and I hope that you are truly inspired by it.
Tina Sizwe, Tina Sizwe, Tina Sizwe, Sikalela, 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 Izwe, Ela Tatwa, Ela Tatwa, Ela Tatwa. Ela tatwa,
That was incredible. Emotionally moved, I have to say. So we'll be sharing 2 more songs this evening by Quava Vocal Group. So Isabelle and John, I'm so excited to have you with us this evening and to have a conversation with both of you. Isabelle, your experience as the curator of the exhibition, and John, your experience being on the ground in South Africa after Mandela's release, and then your subsequent visits to the country. But Isabelle, I want to start with you first. My understanding is that the exhibition took about 3 years or so to research and develop, and you ultimately curated an exhibit that is divided into the 5 zones: apartheid, defiance, repression, mobilization, and freedom. So can you talk to us a little bit about the creation of the exhibition, and then what ultimately led you to decide on those 5 zones or narrow it down?
Thank you, Kelley. We exactly 3 years, yes. We first started with the partnership with the Apartheid Museum. And we had a starting point in the sense that they created, they have a show specifically focused on Mandela, the man, and his experience throughout his life. And we had that starting point, that knowledge and beautiful exhibition. And we thought about our own context and wanted to create an exhibition, and had to create an exhibition that would be understood in our own context, where there is definitely a name recognition for Mandela, but we realized that there was less knowledge about South African history, about apartheid, and that much broader story that brought many men and women in South Africa, but also internationally, to join and support the struggle. So we wanted to take that broader perspective, and to the work that we did over 3 years, we traveled to South Africa to conduct research 3 times as a team. So our work was really informed with connecting with leading institutions, not only the Apartheid Museum, our partner, but also the Nelson Mandela Foundation in Johannesburg, and the Robben Island Museum, Mayibuye Archives in Cape Town. And that work, that engagement was really critical to how we came about our story. And also as well, of course, because we were taking this broader perspective, we also went across Canada and interviewed people who had joined in the struggle, wanting to understand what brought them to action, what inspired them, and what they did during this time period to support the struggle. So we gathered all of this research and information, and then had to boil it down to something that would be broadly accessible to North American audiences. And of course, so we came about to defining the narrative in the story through these 5 zones, and each zone is made of striking design, immersive experience, interactive experience as well. And we brought in all the wonderful archival footage and images that we had, and boil it down to something simple as a first zone that sets the stage for a story that we're going to tell. So apartheid, where visitors are confronted to the unjust laws of this system. And then from there, our focus was really on the broad movement of resistance against the system. And so we come to defiance and meet our main character, Mandela. Within our story is a main character. So we meet Mandela, the boxer, the lawyer, the man, the leader. And then from there, we realize what they're up against and what kinds of strategies they first use in terms of civil disobedience. And from there, we enter repression, so that we could talk about the experience of political prisoners. Mandela was in prison for 27 years. We recreate his cell at Robben Island and tell some of the stories that are relevant to that time period. And then with mobilization throughout the show, we use colors, we use music to convey not only knowledge about the history of that struggle, but also to help people connect on different level with the energy of resistance and mobilization. And so mobilization brings out this connection not only to the history of the resistance in South Africa and mobilization, but also on an international scale and the international connection. And from there, we are brought to freedom from the moment of his release from prison to the work, the ongoing work of national reconciliation and the work that had been done for democratic transformation. And so a narrative, a story, if you will, that unfolds in different chapters, and each chapters brings about different experiences and layers of knowledge and information, but that is also boiled down to something that is very broadly accessible.
I agree, Isabelle, and I have to say, I want to get back in a few minutes to this idea of mobilization and your curation of including Canadian upstanders, people who worked in the struggle. But John, I want to talk to you, even before we go to South Africa with you and your interview, how did this incredible opportunity come to you? And can you talk a little bit about the team, which I know was really special and handpicked by you, the team that you brought with you?
And I was excited to be a part of what was about to happen in South Africa. So of course, you know, you go to your news directors and you kick it around, and I really didn't think that I would have a ghost of a chance, because you know there are so many other noted reporters and correspondents for CBS at the time that I knew would be, you know, miles ahead of me in the chance to go. But I put it in anyway. And lo and behold, I got the opportunity. They said, yeah, you can go. Now, who do you want to pick as your team? I mean, who do you want to shoot it, to edit it, and the whole 9 yards? And I had my pick of a lot of folks at CBS, lots of veteran guys, some who'd already been to war, been in lots of conflicts and civil rights struggles on this continent and others in the world. And I just thought that this young man, a guy by the name of Randall Blakey, who was just barely, 22, 23 years old at the time, that he had never had a civil rights experience. He had never had an opportunity to see this kind of struggle up close and personal. And so I decided to choose Randall. And he was perhaps more surprised than anybody at CBS that he was going to go to South Africa ahead of Mandela getting out of prison. But he was so excited. And you would have been amazed to see him behind the scenes, you know, prepping and getting all ready and all excited and reading as much as he could, and immersing himself in this whole experience that he was anticipating. And so that's how I got there. And of course, once we got there, CBS had a full complement of reporters and correspondents, technical people, and because there was a prospect of Mandela getting out of prison during this trip, you know, they had brought crews in from Europe, from South America, from other parts of Africa, to be there. And so we had an enormous bureau that had been put together under the direction of Larry Doyle at the time. And we were just waiting, anticipating, and trying to see what was going to happen next. But we were definitely prepared, and Randall probably stayed more prepared than anybody, because, you know, singularly, he shot it and he edited it, and he had to be
Wow.
cool. He had to be cool under fire from some of the things that we saw actually happen right in front of us. So I was most impressed with him, and so were the powers that be at CBS at the time.
Amazing, amazing. Well, we're going to show a little bit more in this program, John, your incredible award-winning documentary, Wins for Change. We're going to talk a little bit more about Randall and some of the footage that he took. But I want to, Isabelle, I want to go back to this idea of mobilization that you spoke about, and one of the big things, and Bill mentioned it in his introductory remarks, that at the museum, we talk a lot about upstanders and individual and collective action and sustained action. And you could have just curated an exhibition that focused on the struggle of apartheid in Mandela, but you chose to also include the Canadian story and those individuals and organizations and policymakers who were also working towards the end of the struggle. Can you talk a little bit about that decision and why you chose that path?
Mm-hmm. It's it links directly back to our mandate also as a human rights museum, and to the connection that we with the work that we create really intend on sparking reflection and dialogue on human rights, and inspiring, as you do as well, action and change. And so the focus on mobilization and showing that really a broad movement, many people from different backgrounds join in that struggle, was critical to how we wanted to achieve that mandate. And the ability as well to tell a story that allowed for connection, for people to connect to different story and narrative that build to this broader story, but also for people to be able to connect an historical struggle to their own current context. So we had all of these things in mind when we set about to tell a story, to show that the story was broader than a single individual taking action, that many people join in that process, that people from different backgrounds within their churches, within their union, on their university campus, joined in. And I think that that kind of work allows people to perhaps see themselves, to perhaps be inspired by that story, and themselves to hopefully, that's the goal, to connect to their current situation, to connect to the injustices around us in today, and be inspired by this work.
Yeah, and well done. I mean, really delivered quite powerfully in the exhibition, the stories that are shared. So I'm looking forward for our visitors to take part. So John, to kind of build upon that, let's kind of now turn to this big moment. And I want to play a clip from your Winds of Change documentary, in which you are in the energy of Cape Town City Hall after Mandela's release, and you're filming and witnessing a really powerful speech by Mandela. So let's play that clip, and then we'll come back to your reaction to that.
On the day of his release, I saw thousands jammed into the town square at Cape Town City Hall. I saw them come by vans and cars. Others walked or even ran to the square, most of them to see for the first time the man who had symbolized their plight and their quest for freedom from behind prison walls.
I have fought against white domination. And I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve. But if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die.
So John, and I'm hearing people shouting Madiba, shouting his name. We have to keep in mind, so apartheid hasn't ended, right, with his release, and this is a dangerous, really a dangerous situation. This gathering. So maybe speak to that, but also, I mean, just the excitement and the energy. What was that like for you?
Before we get that, I want to make sure that
Yeah.
Bill realizes those were the words. That was the first time most of us had ever heard those words that Bill just got on that photo that Mandela, I think, sent back, or that document that Mandela sent back to him. You know, that was just one of those moments that riveted, you know, you to the plight of the people of South Africa. Sitting there and watching him, I was in the mayor's office behind him. He was on the balcony there. I was behind him, inside with Walter Sisulu. You saw him standing next to him. He walked out of the mayor's office onto the balcony, and when they all came back inside, Cyril Ramaphosa. It was just a moment that was just brimming with not only excitement but possibility. But to see his face, to see his visage there on that balcony, for those thousands upon thousands of people who turned out, they were just hanging on every single word. And we were crossing our fingers, though we didn't think that there would be anything violent would transpire at that particular moment with the whole world watching. But we just you never knew. You never put down your guard either.
It's incredible. I mean, Isabelle, I've been learning through this process and, learning from you over these past couple days and from John. There's just so many incredible stories and moments and events. And just curious, as you were curating this exhibition, was there any particular moment or event that you're like, we have to put this in the exhibition, or that you found, particularly inspiring that, you went to the mats and said, we have to include?
Oh, that happens a lot. we at some point, I think we had much too much. We had too many wonderful stories. We had too many wonderful moments. We had access to exceptional archives in the work that we were doing, an expert in South Africa who were willing to engage and help us boil this down. I think through my research, going back to South Africa, being able to take in the history with those new eyes, those eyes of not a young woman as I was in '94 at the time, and not a student when I was later doing or advanced studies, but as a curator who thought and saw things a bit differently. And so for instance, so there were many moments. For instance, we, in Defiance, we create a scene and the setting of the 1961 interview that Mandela did. And actually finding out about the context of the interview was striking to me. It was striking when I came back to Canada and told those stories to our team. They could see the moment, feel the importance of the moment. So understanding that the interview was shot at night while Mandela is in clandestinity, that the ANC has been banned, that he's speaking in a context where he has the Sharpeville massacre in mind, and understanding the interview, the crew, that was filming the interview had to pretend that they were shooting an interview with a professor, set everything up in his home, left all the equipment, and came back at night to record an interview with Mandela. Understanding that context became exciting, but also creative. And you see, as you enter Defiance, the recreation of the lounge in which they were sitting at that moment is there, and visitors can come in and actually sit in and watch the interview from that perspective. And so that's an example of just knowing more of the making of the daily lives of people, of what it looked like from that moment in history, really helped us think again and try to create experience rather than focus on words on a wall, you know, to take us outside a bit of the mindset that we are conveying knowledge, but to think more about feelings and experience and colors and sounds of the struggle.
Yeah, and I think in that space, I mean, you did a really fantastic job of delivering, you know, just counterpoint to the setup in the video, kind of that probably that tense, you know, moment. So before we kind of transition, you know, to the next part of our questions, I want to share our next musical performance by Quava Vocal Group, which speaks to the 1976 youth uprisings. As we talk about upstanderism, and taking action, the youth of South Africa were really involved. So let's play our second performance.
Sawashiya bazalekaya savuma sangena kwamanye amazwe lapho khona kungazuma manobaba sanele inkululeko. Sawashiya bazalekaya savuma sangena kwamanye amazwe lapho khona kungazuma manobaba sanele inkululeko. Sithi sala sesingena kwamanye amazwe lapho khona kungazuma manobaba sanele inkululeko. Sasithi sala sesingena kwamanye amazwe lapho khona kungazuma manobaba sanele inkululeko. Sawashiya bafowethu savuma sangena kwamanye amazwe lapho khona kungazuma manobaba sanele inkululeko. Sawashiya dadewethu savuma sangena kwamanye amazwe lapho khona kungazuma manobaba sanele inkululeko. Sasithi sala sesingena kwamanye amazwe lapho khona kungazuma manobaba sanele inkululeko. Sasithi sala sesingena kwamanye amazwe lapho khona kungazuma manobaba sanele inkululeko.
Another incredible performance by Quava Vocal Group. Isabelle, we saw in the kind of scroll in the screen during the performance the picture of Hector, the young boy who was killed during the uprisings. Can you talk to us a little bit about the youth that were involved in the movement, but particularly these events in 1976?
Yes. The Soweto Uprising is pivotal, I would say, in reigniting the struggle. In the historical context, and we convey that to the exhibit, with the 63-64 Rivonia trial that sends Mandela, but also many other key leaders of the struggle, to prison for life, you could say that the resistance has been beheaded. And so in 76, when the student rise up again, it becomes a critical moment in reigniting the struggle. And from there on spreads throughout South Africa with hundreds of organizations, trades union coming together in resistance. And that's the focus of mobilization for us in the exhibition. What's happening with the Soweto Uprising is that the student take the street to protest the imposition of Afrikaans, the language spoken by Afrikaner, Dutch descendant, the imposition of Afrikaans as the language of education. So they're protesting a segregated education system, an education system that doesn't provide much education, in effect, to the Black South African, but also now that will limit them further in their education and experience by forcing them to learn in Afrikaans, a language that is foreign in many ways to them, to their experience, and will limit their opportunities in life. And so they take the streets in protest, in peaceful protest. As in Sharpeville, earlier I've mentioned Sharpeville, peaceful protest against the injustices of the system. And the police in the state responds as it did with Sharpeville, with more repression and violence, and start shooting on high school students. And so killed the photos that went international, the photo of a dying actor Peterson in the arms of a fellow student, is the reality of the Soweto Uprising. And the only thing that students had to defend themselves from police bullets were dustbin lids. And so in our research, we visited the Actor Peterson Museum and Memorial, and saw that they had those dustbin lids. I recreated reproduction for the exhibit where visitors can hold these and understand, connect with that experience of facing repression and violence, being a high school student, in protesting unjust laws and being met with such violence. And this is why we also in that space, we created a Casper, an armored vehicle to convey the repression of the system at the time and what the students and others who joined in were up against.
Yeah, and during our conversations that we were having today about Hector, we were talking about just sometimes how a photograph or those individuals in that photograph can come to spur a movement or catalyze a movement. And we see that so often when it comes to human rights issues. And John, when you were in South Africa, you had the opportunity when you visited Crossroads, the Black shanty town. You interviewed a number of residents, Grace, who had been in a 2-room shack, I believe, for 14 years. But I want everybody to meet Alexandria. So let's play the clip of your interview with Alexandria, and then let's come back to your time in Crossroads.
Parents here have as much concern about the future for their babies as mothers and fathers anywhere else in South Africa. In the grips of some of the worst poverty in the country, they hope for a better life. God knows we've earned it through our struggle, says Crossroads matriarch Alexandria Luke.
They mustn't do what they like to do to us. We want to do what we want to do. More special to build houses and everything. They must come and put everything very clear to us. So means we are not going to fight if they can give that chance to us. Because our chance to now is to say what we want to say to them. There's no control anymore. They mustn't.
And do you think they will listen?
Certainly. It's our chance now. I promise you, 1990 is 1990. It's supposed to be a great changes now.
She says, certainly with such conviction, right? Change is going to come. So John, can you talk about Alexandria and just some of the people you met during your time in Crossroads?
Absolutely. All of them wanted the same thing. They wanted, a decent house that was more than just the ground as a floor in their homes, a dirt floor. They wanted more than having to scrounge around for building material, if I can couch it as such. It certainly wasn't building material. It's just basically some rusted old pieces of metal and and aluminum that they had to stitch their homes together with. That was all they were asking for. If the apartheid government had just simply done the small, almost menial thing, it probably would have kept them in power for a little longer. But that these people were seething now, and Mandela had really his release, his pending release at the time, had really lit the match. They were excited about the possibility of getting things, making their lives much better than they had been under the apartheid government, and so you had guys who could, the best job they could get, the best job was a cab driver or a jeepney driver. That was the best job. It wasn't, it wasn't like Mandela, and you look at the struggles that he had just to become a lawyer. Their struggle every day just to subsist was just, agonizing. And so, yeah, Alexandria was just every one of those people there, whether Crossroads or Cliptown or Soweto, they're all the same. The people were reduced to the same minimalist existence. And, I mean, they wanted decency. They wanted to be considered, as whole and fully involved human beings in the culture and the society, and being able to make a living. It was, but they were, you could see it on their faces that they were so hopeful now. And they had struggled long enough to at least realize, the basic decencies of human existence.
Absolutely. And Isabelle, I mean, listening to Alexandria and seeing in John's film just the conditions of these shanty towns, the Bantustans, the townships, and seeing the conditions, but yet this fire within the people to continue to fight and to resist during the struggle. Can you speak a little bit about that? About what was the movement like in some of these more devastated areas, or in places like Crossroads in the fight against apartheid?
There was definitely a vibrant energy, a resolve for change and transformation in South Africa. The apartheid state was quite intent on breaking that kind of resolve, and built itself into a militarized state that used more and more violence and repression to break that kind of resolve, but didn't succeed. And that's a point we also wanted to convey. Freedom is the last zone of the exhibition, but we didn't want to leave people with a romanticized story where we have the first democratic election, we have TRC, and then we're done. The exhibition is done. And there are continuing inequalities and struggles in South Africa, and we make the point in the exhibition, and that those realities and those inequalities are still current today. But I think a point we make in the exhibition as we say that is that there remains a vibrant energy of resistance and transformation, and we still see it to this day in South Africa, in civil society organization, still fighting for human rights and dignity and equality, as John was mentioning.
Absolutely. And Isabelle, I know that this answer is going to probably be the same when people ask me who of the three of my children are my favorite. But do you have a favorite object or story? You talked a little bit about the interview, but is there one particular object or part of the exhibitry that is your favorite? I won't tell anybody.
I have two children, so I'm also not going to decide. I think I love the notebook in Freedom, an original artifacts. So it's a simple notebook that Mandela used during the negotiation process. So years of negotiation from the moment that he's released from prison in 1990, and even prior, there were talks about talks, really difficult, long negotiations. a process that is stalled, that is derailed, that doesn't meet its deadlines many times. That is very difficult. And I think that was important for us to tell that part of the story, because struggles are difficult, right? Personally, politically, they take a long time. You need resilience, you need strength, you need to, well, what we saw in the clip that we just saw, that resolve. And I think that the artifact talks about that without the requirement of any photos or anything else. It's so eloquent. And so if you read through the notebook, you see notes that Mandela took in a meeting: failures to meet deadline, the struggle as ups and downs. If the clerk is not committed, we must make him committed. So you see the reality of the in-moment difficulties and challenges of that process. And for me, it was the perfect artifact for the work we had to do in that space, and a source of inspiration, not only historically, but in current context, right? Where struggles are difficult, and struggles for equality and transformation require that resolve, that commitment, and belief that change is possible.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites too. So I agree.
Great.
So John, there was no right or wrong answer, but I agree. So John, I want to get back to Randall. So you have this 25-year-old cameraman that you've brought with you. And in your documentary, you actually gave him the opportunity. He was keeping a diary, a journal, while he was in South Africa with you. And you, at one point, were witness to a youth group that was protesting, and then everything kind of comes into disarray, violence erupts, and it's being suppressed, right? And you and Randall are in the crux of it. And he shares in his entry, which I want to play the clip of, his reaction and feeling of a young man. So let's watch that and then come back.
This was my first glimpse of the 60s in Chicago, Alabama, and Georgia. It was the worst, the absolute worst treatment of people I'd ever seen. While everything was happening, I was trying to shoot, think, be angry, control anger, make sure John and I stayed together, and deal with seeing my people treated like mere animals, dogs, wild dogs. As we started to walk away, I couldn't even get full sentences to form from my mouth, so I just remained silent, with a million thoughts running rampant through my brain. But the most prevalent was seeing my people so powerful in song and dance, but yet so powerless to teenage whites who've been dubbed authority in charge by local government. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows but me.
So John, I want you to not only talk about that moment, but you and I also talked about earlier about what it must be like for you as a journalist, that you're a journalist plus a witness, right, to this happening, and the kind of multiple roles that you're playing. Can you just talk a little bit about even the conversations maybe or discussions you had with Randall after that moment?
Well, as Randall alluded, he was just numb. I mean, when you have an eyepiece from a camera up to your eye, I mean, that's all of the reality. Shooting right through that lens, right through the back of your brain. It will never, ever be forgotten. It is a safe that keeps it, and it's locked there forever. Randall was just simply numb. This was happening. This was a peaceful protest of people coming out of St. Mary's Church in Johannesburg. And all they were doing was just doing a simple toy, singing and dancing and being peaceful, and were moving along, but they were not moving along fast enough. Now, they were celebrating the unbanning. The government had just announced that it was unbanning, so the ANC and others wouldn't have to, scurry for cover anymore. That it was okay. We know who they are. It's okay for them to be out, so these people were just celebrating that peacefully and moving along, following the orders of the police, when all of a sudden, apparently they were not moving fast enough. And one young cherubic looking angelic almost looking police officer, young. He turned and grabbed the barrel of his rifle and he started hitting people in the head with it. And one person died, maybe two in that stampede to get away from the police violence. It was numbing. Afterwards, we went back to the CBS News Bureau, and we sat there, and Larry Doyle, the bureau chief, asked Randall, "What's wrong?" Because Randall was very, very quiet. He was just numb to it all, and he says, "You wouldn't believe what we just saw." He said, "What did you see?" And Randall says, "Well, these people, they were just treated like dogs. They were like beaten like animals, you know." And he says, "That's not what you saw." And Randall says, "What are you talking about?" And he was, you know, Randall was getting a little indignant. He was like, "Come on, man. I saw it. I shot it. I got
right
of it." But Doyle says, and he tears off the wire service from the South African wire service. And it says 3 South African police officers were injured today by a rock and bottle throwing mob outside of St. Mary's Church. And Larry Doyle says, "That's what you saw." He says, "If you didn't see it, that's what the whole world will hear."
Wow. Wow.
So that became even more important, that we videotaped it and we got it out to the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And John, I mean, how long were you on the ground in South Africa when you were there?
The first time we were there, little over 2-3 weeks.
Okay.
And you know, we went, as you said, we went from Cape Town south to Johannesburg and all around that area, Soweto. We had some very, very intense discussions with people who lived in Soweto who were seemingly well-to-do. I mean, they had nice homes. Some of those areas, they had really, really nice homes. And these guys were telling me how, you know, how important it was for Blacks in the United States to be in one accord with those struggling in South Africa. Because once all of this is over and the old man is out of prison, we'll be able to share all of this with you. And I reminded them that they would be wise to study African American history to see what Reconstruction can look like, how after slavery can really look like.
Yeah.
And it may not be all that it's cranked up to be, because you could be more enslaved in this kind of democracy in South Africa than you ever were under apartheid.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my goodness. Amazing. And John, you at one point, you told me you were actually kind of like in a truck, smuggled down, hiding at one point, right? They made you hide. So I want you to talk about that, but also, so you're there for 2 weeks. So kind of similar to what I asked Isabelle, but a little bit different. Can you talk about, I mean, you witnessed so much, you know, was there a particular moment that you kind of took away as a defining moment of your trip there?
Well, I think as a personal feeling of the kind of intimidation, for instance, that this kind of government can have on an individual's life. I had gone out to Soweto the first day that I was in South Africa because I wanted to talk to the people, the men who worked in the hotel, but they could not talk to me in the hotel. They couldn't even sit down in my room. So I had to go out there on a crowded jitney, and you know, I never even thought about how I was going to get back. But they took me, they brought me back as far as they could and let me out, showed me the direction to the hotel. I could actually see the hotel, but before I got there, I was stopped. I was stopped, and everything in my pockets were turned inside out. Now, what happened next is that they found my U.S. passport and my papers for my reservation at the Carlton Hotel, and they were upset. They were really ticked at me because I had a kind of shell, a cover. I had a right, you know, as a Black man, not from South Africa, to be out on the street, you know. And so they called me, you know, Kaffer, and sent me on my way. I had to scoop up my stuff to go back to the hotel. But I thought that was, you know, one of those telling experiences that that kind of defined South Africa at the moment. But my being allowed to leave, you know, unbeaten, was really a shadow of what could be.
And John, you've gone back, and you actually brought back your son at the request of Mandela, if I'm correct, right?
Well, Mandela, when I saw him at the mayor's office after he had just gotten out of prison, I told him that I probably wouldn't even be there. I wouldn't know much about him had it not been for my son, Szany. My son, Szany, and a young kid by the name of Arthur Amaker, had started a little newspaper, underground newspaper at Evanston High School here called Amandla. And then Szany, of course, was telling me all about this Mandela and the South African struggle. And I think he was in the 10th grade in high school. So here he's educating his father, who's a fairly wealthy guy, but who didn't know hardly anything at all about Mandela. And so I told Mandela about this. And as I was telling him, I got a little teary, and Mandela embraced me. And Jesse Jackson was there, Walter Sisulu. It was an amazing, amazing thing. He says, bring him back. You come back to South Africa, bring him back. So I did. I brought Szany back with me the time for the election. And little did I know, when Szany got off of the plane at Jan Smuts Airport, Szany kissed the ground. And now all of the ramp people and all of the Black people working there heard about this young African-American who kissed the ground when he got there off the plane. The first act he made was to kiss the ground. And of course, when we were getting ready to leave, they didn't want Szany to leave. They wanted to leave him here, Davis. Leave him here.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Well, so I guess, you know, mindful of the time, Isabelle and John, this has been such an incredible conversation. I've learned so much from you. And I want to kind of, my final question to the both of you. There's an African phrase called Ubuntu, this idea of a person acknowledging their role in the community. You know, this idea of tikkun olam, right? That our actions can work to change the world. So looking at the era in the world that we are in today, Isabelle, maybe you can go first. What do you think Mandela's message of Ubuntu would be for us today?
I think that it would have much relevance to today. And in the exhibition, we while we don't specifically refer back to Ubuntu, we wanted to end on a powerful quote. And I think for me, and in that context, today's context, one of the quotes from his biography about freedom not being strictly casting one's change, but the way in which we each live, and in a way to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. And I think for me that the connection is very powerful, and it's something we leave visitors to think about. And I think has much resonance in today. What is the way in which we eat individually and collectively, because it's Thai, live? What do our action mean and entail in terms of freedom, not only for our own experience, but collectively the experience of freedom? And I think that's what is still so relevant today and connected to our current struggles and challenges.
Absolutely, here. And John, you and I have had lots of conversations about this. So what are your thoughts? I know I'm excited for you to see the exhibition. But what do you think, you know, is Mandela's, would be his Ubuntu, his message for us today?
That the struggle continues. That we're not, none of us is free until all of us is free, you know. And he embodied that when you saw the kinds of coalitions that he was trying to put together. So we can't be free as Black South Africans if the Indians are not free here, you know, if the coloreds are not free here, if even some of the whites who were communists at the time or whatever, everybody needed to have this feeling, this assuredness of freedom, of being able to see a measure of themselves being lifted generation after generation, and not being trampled upon and having their rights trampled upon by anybody at any time. So the struggle continues. I think that if Mandela was still with us today, he would still be up and out, you know, making sure that every voice is being heard, and freedom is ringing from hill to hill and from country to country.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we close the program, I want to conclude with one final amazing program by a performance by Quava Vocal Group. And it's a song that celebrates not only the release of Mandela, but his life and legacy.
Ekudala lwelinkululeko khona manje usuyitholile, ungashintshi kwesosimo usilethela uxolo. Nelson Mandela, Nelson Mandela, Nelson Mandela, usilethela uxolo. Nelson Mandela, Nelson Nelson Mandela, hauya yatwananliye. Nelson Mandela, Nelson Mandela, Nelson Mandela, hauya yatwananliye. Hauya yatwananliye, hauya yatwananliye, hauya yatwananliye, hauya yatwananliye. Nelson Mandela, Nelson Mandela, Nelson Mandela, hauya yatwananliye na.
Well, I think that absolutely says it all. And John, I actually, as the song was playing, so Randall is actually here watching the program.
Yes, he is.
And he said that it was, his experience with you was absolutely life-changing, and that today he is still working for the rights of all. So Isabelle and John, thank you so much. I just enjoyed this conversation, your passion for this topic, and this continued work, John, as you said, towards the struggle and the freedom for all is a challenge for each of us as we continue to work for justice and equity. So I want to remind everybody that's watching that the museum is open during this time. The exhibition will be open to the public on Saturday, and we also have virtual tour opportunities. So please visit the museum, visit our website, ilholocaustmuseum.org, for a slate of incredible programs, some including our wonderful John Davis. So thank you again, Isabelle and John. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Susan. And to the Quava Vocal Group. Everyone, have a good evening.